Today's guest is Sports Illustrated senior host and writer Robin Lundberg. Robin and I talked about his career working in the sports media industry, working for ESPN for over a decade, and now he works at Sports Illustrated. We also talked about the NBA. He's a huge Nets fan, covers the Nets, and we talk about the Nets a ton. We talk about the Nets trade. Who won the trade between Harden and Ben Simmons? Will Ben Simmons actually play this year for the Nets? And will the Nets make the playoffs and even go play in the NBA Finals this year? We also talk about the Lakers and LeBron. What's the relationship between those two? And will LeBron end his career in LA? And before you start watching this interview with Robin and I need you to go like, subscribe, and share this video. Subscribe to the channel. I have a ton of more interviews with people in sports media, sports, and entertainment, and tons of more to come. The subscribing actually helps, believe it or not. It really does help. So subscribe now, like the video, and share it with your friends and family. They'll love it just as much as you like it because you're watching it right now. So when you kick back, relax, and watch this interview with Robin Lundberg and I right now. Today's guest is senior host and writer for Sports Illustrated is Robin Lundberg. Robin, thank you for coming on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem, man. Always a pleasure.
So, Robin, your career has jumped from, started ESPN as an intern, went to Fox Sports, ESPN again for over a decade. The time about at ESPN for over a decade, you worked with Stephen A., Max Kellerman. How was it like working with those two big-time personalities? And all of us fans or people in the media that watch those two guys on TV or listen to the radio, we have that one perspective on them.
Max is a good friend of mine. Right. And I was an intern at Around the Horn. And, that's where I got to know him. And, I made my impression as an intern at Around the Horn because I got the food orders right. So that's how things have changed since that time period. I don't know if interns are allowed to go get food anymore or if that's frowned upon. But, this is when I think Chipotle had just started. And I memorized everybody's order and got it right. So, I won in that competition, at least against the fellow interns, the way I viewed it. And when Max went up to New York to launch a show called IMAX back in the day, that's when I went with them to Fox Sports. So when I found myself back at ESPN Radio, obviously I was working with him and I was working with Stephen A. Those shows were, I believe, back to back. So I had a prior relationship with Max, and I was sort of the sidekick on that show, punching in with humor and my opinions on stuff, that kind of thing. With Stephen A., I was more a traditional producer, and Stephen A. is he's low key. People don't realize, and that's a lot of people in this industry or in various industries. But when the light goes on, of course, it's game time. But he's a little low key. Otherwise, very cool, and collected or whatnot. But you're not seeing the delivery that you see when the cameras are rolling when they're not rolling.
Yeah, because we see the Stephen A. of the hot takes, or hopefully not jumping ship from one opinion to the next, which I think he just did that with Kyrie, kind of flipping back and forth. But it's always nice to hear somebody who's worked behind the scenes or just as another guy on the air working with those two guys, which those are the mega stars in this business. But for you had your own show with Ryan Ruocco, and then you had your own show on ESPN. What was it like transitioning? And the grind is so big. It's so hard in this industry. I'm still grinding right now. I work at WFAN right now for the last 3 years, but the grind working from, it's hard to say, but basically a nobody and then turning into a somebody. So talk about that transition.
Yeah, it's fair. I was a nobody because I had and this is no disrespect to anybody. I don't mean this as a shot to anybody, but some people are positioned in a better way because of, a connection through the industry. They know an executive or who their parents are or whatever the case may be. Right. And that can help you out. I didn't have that. And I was also seen as a producer. I was seen as, like maybe a punk kid at first. but then, like I was viewed as the producer or whatnot. So you talk about a career path, and you still never know, even where I'm at this, I still never know what's behind door number 2 necessarily, right? And hopefully it's all good things nowadays, but it wasn't a straight line. Like, I thought I had it made because I was an intern for Around the Horn. I was almost on Around the Horn in college.
Really?
There was a day that somebody's satellite feed dropped out, and the EP at the time, Bill Wolf, had suggested they put me on as like the intern, and I guess the suits
in there.
Yeah, suits squashed that idea. And then there was one day, I think Max had a dental emergency, and they didn't know who to put on. And Tony Reale was stat boy on PTI, so they're like, "Oh, you've been on TV before." So I had to run to his apartment to get his suit so he could do that. When I came to the city, and I thought, I'm working in TV, sports TV, right out of school. I skipped my last like 3 weeks of college to go work, but that show didn't last too long for a variety of circumstances. And then I just thought, oh, that's fine. I'm just going to get to the next thing. And it didn't happen like that. Like, I was waiting tables and bartending for a long time. And then I got in at ESPN Radio, but again, I was making $14 an hour. A producer doing all this stuff. And it's very hard to break the way people see you, right? So even at, I'm trying to think of the exact timeline. So was it with Ryan? Yeah. So I do the show with Ryan. And when that show started, I created, it was Ryan's show. It was his show. And I created some like gimmicks that got me on the air. And
whatever you can do to get yourself on. I mean, that's the name of the game.
Dave Roberts, who's high up in the food chain at ESPN now, I guess liked the camaraderie, the chemistry we had. So it sort of became organic. And we were doing the leadoff spot, which was at 5 a.m. to 6 a.m. And then then they added, because that did so well, like, with the way radio numbers work, and that time slot, like one other person started listening to us. So all of a sudden we're like the number one show in the market. And then the 10 a.m., we started doing the 10 a.m. show. So we were doing 5 to 6 a.m. and then 10 to 11. And then that led to the midday show. And when that happened, is when I really thought I made it. It's, I saw my picture in the advertisements. We were on noon to 2, I believe. And that was it. Like, I was like, I remember being in the streets in New York, like tears in my eyes. I was so happy.
How old were you?
Shoot, probably, we're talking now, man, at least 10 years ago, right? Probably more than that. So somewhere like around 25 to 30.
Holy crap.
Yeah.
That's insane. I mean, I would be on top of the world. I'm hosting my own radio show at ESPN Radio. I mean, you can't get bigger than that.
Yes, somewhere between around 25 to 30 in that age range. And I tell you the truth, is Stephen A came back, and it's not Stephen A's fault. It wasn't his fault. It was just circumstances, right? He comes back, and of course he's Stephen A, so they need a time slot for him, and we have the least like gravitas. So they blew up that show. Ryan was more established than I was, so he stays on with Stephen A for a time period. They did a little bit of, a show together. I didn't know what was going to happen. That's why I wanted to get married. I didn't know what I was going to do when I came back. I come back and they offer me the producer job on the Michael Kay show. And I said, no, I'm not doing anything unless it's on air. I didn't have a fallback option. I just put that out there.
I understand, though, the reason why you would say no, because you have the experience and then you've also put the time in already as a producer. Why would I go backwards again?
Exactly. So I said that, and then they carved out an overnight slot for me, essentially. I mean, it was 3 o'clock in the morning was when it first started. Then it eventually became 4, and then eventually came my own show, and my own show was 4 to 6. And the benefit of that is where I was a little bit ahead at that point in time, and where the numbers backed it up. This is when podcasting first became a thing, and I looked at it and was like, okay, you have loyal people in that time slot because people who are working those jobs, you're keeping them company. But I also thought I could be the first podcast out the door every day. So my podcast was doing as well as every show, but I think Kay's show, the afternoon drive show, at that time, because we were getting the podcast up by 7 a.m. Right. So if you're on a normal commute, you could listen to the podcast. If you're on, graveyard shift, you could listen live, or your night hour, whatever the case may be. So I did that for a while, which eventually then they brought Mike Golick Jr. over, and we did a show together. And I think, to be honest, I was used to test some people out and to work with some people. I think Mina Kimes did her first show with me, and I remember telling them she's cool people. I like her a lot. That first show, Will Kane, I think, did his first show at ESPN Radio with me. Gold Jr., who I just referenced, did it. Yeah. So there was a period in my career where I got a little frustrated because I was like, you think I'm good enough for all this and for these people, but where is my,
right.
One thing led to another, and the ESPN tenure ended. And that's what brought me over to SI, because I was at this point in time, I think the LeBron Jordan thing was not quite a thing. It was like on the cusp, and I was probably one of the first people who definitively said LeBron's better. And we did a video my second day on the job that did like 10 million views. So I was like, oh, I got that job. And that's what, led to me being entrenched at SI. Even like shout out to Peter Rosenberg, who's on the K show now. He had me on Hot 97 off of that. And, so that, and then there's still been ups and downs at, every phase of my career working at, I've worked at a lot of places, man. WFAN and CBS Sports Radio, and Sirius XM, and my main gig at SI. I've been holding down for a minute here. But
I got the laundry list right here. I'm all prepared. I got the whole list. It is a lot. I mean,
so my point is, it's not like point A to point B. Maybe other people's careers are more linear than that, but I am proud of myself for having persevered and being where I'm at.
What's funny, Robin, is that it's refreshing to hear someone like yourself that has this long resume, right? It's all this great stuff, but it took you a long way to get to here. People that are not in this business don't understand. They're like, oh, you must have been on TV forever. I mean, this is like, you go to college, you got a small job, and then you get a bigger job, and then you're doing that job forever. Like, no, that's not how it works. You got to just jump from boom, 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 boom. And then eventually you'll get Sports Illustrated since 2017, and you're making all these awesome videos on their social channels. You're hosting everything. And there's one video I kind of want to talk about that I really like that you made. It was called The Hot Take: How Sports Opinions Took Over the World. And I watched the whole thing this morning. I watched it a few times, just trying to, first of all, your writing is very good. Like, it's the way you crafted that whole thing with different jokes in between. It was very, very well written. But the interesting thing is that who do you think is the best sports debater of all time? You have all these amazing, you went in detail to the history of the columnists and sports talk radio, and, Francesa and Mad Dog are revolutionary in their own right. But who do you think is the best right now when it comes to captivating an audience, getting them to listen to either negative or positive reviews, and, I just overall eyeballs? Who is the best in your opinion?
Well, look, there's different criteria for that, and there's different preferences some people have, right? Like some people like rants and over the top stuff. Some people like humor or analytical, whatever the case may be. Like I'll give credit to, I always, even from working with him back in the day, Max was very, I know he got the give me Iguodala and some of that stuff is blown up, but his approach was much more, I thought, intelligent and thoughtful at times. But you can't hate on some of the people who have done what they've done. Like Stephen A is a giant. Stephen A is the biggest star probably in the history of ESPN, maybe in the history of the sports media business. You have to give him credit for that. He's dynamic on camera, right? Like I almost think he's more akin to like a pro wrestling character than an analyst at times. But hat tip, you can't front on Stephen A. So I would say absolutely probably Stephen A and Colin Cowherd. I was
about to say Colin too. I love Baker Mayfield. I'm an Oklahoma Sooner fan, so it's hard listening to Colin because all he does is rag on Baker, and it's like a narrative thing. Like, all right, so he's gonna rag on Baker, and a ton of people will react to it. But like guys like Skip Bayless, I just cannot. I can't listen to him. I can't read his tweets because I think he's moved from the First Take era where he was debating Stephen A, and that was good TV. But now I think he's doing more of a troll job where he's just trolling LeBron on everything he does. If he doesn't score 25, but he scores 24, he's going to say something. That's what I don't like.
Well, you look, the guy's gotten paid millions of dollars to do that, right? Like there's almost
$10 million a year.
A perverse art form to what he does, like to figure out a way to, but yeah, he's a carnival barker. It's not to be taken seriously. I don't take it seriously. It's one of the reasons I probably didn't even think to mention him, right? Cowherd has had his moments like that, and I'm sure he's been made fun of. But to do, and I know this from doing it, to do radio, and now radio is TV, and the same thing for him, every single day for hours at a time, and be able to command an audience for that long is worthy of lauding and complimenting. And when he's at his best, I think he can give you that mix of being thoughtful and entertaining at the same time. Everybody, all of us, I've been guilty of it too. Not to compare myself to these guys, because these guys have done more than and are bigger than I am in my career. But from having personal experience in it, there's some you wish you could have back, right? Or sometimes you get caught up in the moment. But what's in crafting a take, the challenge today is twofold. One, there's just so many out there, so it's hard to cut through. And then secondly, all right, how do you do something that's going to engage people, that's going to catch through, that's going to grab them, but isn't going to sell yourself out? And that's the tightrope that you have to balance sometimes. I used to have a strategy. I still employ it sometimes. It's like, a splashy catch line or headline or lead. And then I get into my more rational, like, what,
with all the details.
Okay, now that makes sense.
Yeah, right. And something I also read was it seems like every 15 tweets that you post, one becomes super viral with an opinion of yours. I think it was the Kyrie one, was Kyrie's a better player than Harden, and it had 8,000 tweets. I want to talk about, or likes, I want to get into the Nets, because you are a Nets guy. You had a podcast at the New York Post. You are a Nets super fan, it seems like. The trade that happened with the 76ers, I talked to Ruko about this. He gave his opinion. Who do you think won the trade with the Harden-Simmons trade? In my opinion, quickly, to give a basis, I think the Nets won overall because of the Andre Drummond and Seth Curry depth, because depth is huge. When when they go down a playoff run, you need depth when it comes to the late game. And of course, Simmons, whenever he starts playing. But will he ever start playing?
Yeah, I think both teams did well in the trade, to be frank. I don't mean that to be a cop-out, but I think the Nets saved themselves, because the Nets were in a spot where you were staring down the barrel of utter disaster, right? Like that Harden trade, the only thing that they would have had to salvage them is that Kevin Durant is locked up long-term. But aside from that, the Harden trade was on the precipice of being an all-time disaster, not because of the results on the court, the fact that those guys never were on the court together, and that Harden was obviously unhappy. So you had a guy who was tanking it and may just leave. So you had to do whatever you could to salvage that initial James Harden trade. So I think they did very well in that context, because you add a Ben Simmons who should theoretically, if he ever plays a game, fit with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. And then, like you mentioned, Curry and Drummond aren't just depth. They fill specific needs. The Nets have needed size and rebounding. That's Drummond. The Nets needed another shooter. That's Curry. The Nets' problem is what it's been all season. It's been like a disaster of a season, but it's just availability. None of these guys are out there ever. It feels like Kyrie, the half the time thing.
Joe Harris is out.
Joe Harris is out. Kevin Durant's about to come back. Simmons hasn't played. The Sixers, I don't know about the long term. How will Harden age? The extension that he's going to be due in the short term. You have to remember Ben Simmons wasn't playing at all for them either.
Right.
So they essentially, in the current time, traded Andre Drummond and Seth Curry for James Harden. Exactly. And, James Harden, whatever you want to say about him, is a heck of a basketball player. And when he's feeling his best, his orchestration can be eye-opening. He also seems to be a natural fit for Joel Embiid in the pick and roll, at the free throw line, what have you. The Kyrie tweet in question that blew up is I said Kyrie's a better scorer than James Harden. And what I meant by that, and this is from having watched both closely with the Nets, is Harden relies a lot on having the ball all the time. And I think his best trait when he's at his best is his playmaking. But as a scorer, it's the step back three. It's getting to the free throw line. And if he has spacing and a roll man, he can get that floater game going and get into the lane. But
and
he
also,
sorry,
go ahead.
He doesn't finish at the rim like Kyrie. He doesn't have the in-between game like Kyrie. So when it's really tough defenses and there's not space, I think Kyrie is better at getting his own shot, because Kyrie could score at every level. He can score at the rim. He can hit you at the mid-range. He can hit you in the post. He can hit you from three. He can get into spaces with his dribble. Like, as far as creating his own shot, I think actually KD and Kyrie are the two most unguardable players, in the sense that it doesn't matter who else is around them. If they have the basketball, they can figure out a way to put it in the hoop.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth with the playing inside, and also with Kyrie, one of the best ball handlers there is. And if we can get him on the court more than half the year, I think the Nets situation would be even better. I mean, will this team make it far into the playoffs? We're still trying to figure out what's with the whole mask mandate and the COVID mandate. Is Kyrie gonna be able to play home games in the playoffs?
This is something Ruocco and I text about frequently. It's so asinine that it's aggravating, because this isn't coming from a Nets fandom thing. It's just coming from a common sense thing. Like, and I'm not anti-vaxxer, by the way. I have all 3 shots. I got the booster.
Me too.
I've always been.
We got to clarify that nowadays.
There was a time when I was pro-mandate, to be honest with you. But my opinion on mandates in general has changed post-Omicron, because with Omicron, it infected everybody, right? It just ran through the population. NBA locker rooms, which are 99% vaccinated, the whole teams were getting infected. The NFL just stopped testing. Nobody cared, by the way. That's why the playoffs were so great, because nobody was out, because they just weren't testing anybody. Nobody even noticed. Right. In the NBA, you now have the just asinine rule for Kyrie, where one, you can just argue the mandates don't serve a purpose anymore in general, and that's why you see them dropping. But then two, this specific one that is in place, not only can the visiting unvaccinated players play at Barclays Center, but Kyrie can practice with the team. He can, starting next week, attend games. He can go on the road. He just can't play in the games he attends at home. So there is zero argument from a logical standpoint that it makes any sense. And there's zero argument from a health standpoint. You cannot, with a straight face, say this is helping anybody's health or keeping people safer. So what the hell is going on? That's what I would say.
Look, there's so many variables too. So like if there wasn't a problem with this and Kyrie was playing all year with the Nets, would Harden be traded?
It's tough to know exactly what the root of Harden's issues were, how deep they were, what they, if that was the main point of contention, no. And to be honest, you just asked me like straight up, probably my instant reaction would be no. I don't know what else went on with Harden. Obviously KD needed to sign off on that happening. So, there was probably more than meets the eye, because I know there was issues with his play style, and then they thought they should play faster. He was playing slow. Was that because he was like almost protesting? I don't know. And I know there was, I'd heard some rumblings about some of his extracurricular activities and the nightlife stuff. So I don't know, there's also, Harden could be frustrated that those guys were receiving preferential treatment. He wouldn't be wrong to say like, you're bending over backwards for Kyrie. I don't know all the politics that went on behind the scenes, so I can't answer that definitively. All I do know is with where the situation got to, the Nets had to salvage it, and I think that's what they did. But as far as what they're going to do the rest of the year, I can't tell you, because we're now running out of time. You're running out of time, and I don't think the play-in is such a bad thing if they're 7 or 8, because if they are all on the floor, I don't see them losing twice to those play-in teams. But they can't be a hypothetical team forever. Eventually, these players we talk about being on the court together need to be on the court together, or else you got to punt till next year.
Now, a team that's hypothetical, which I want to end off here, not hypothetical. It's you have to figure out, are they in it to win it, or is next year going to be the year? The Lakers are all over the place. You're having conversations of LeBron wanting to play with Bronny somewhere else when that future comes. LeBron's fighting with fans and arguing with fans. People get injected. They're losing a ton. What is your idea of how this team is going to be performing down the stretch of the season? Because look, we're running out of time. The NBA season is going to be coming to an end like this. So where are the Lakers going to end off at the end of the year?
They suck. Just it is what it is. I said that at the beginning of the year, and then you lose Anthony Davis. It makes it worse. They just don't have much talent. And LeBron's 37 in his 19th season. It's not a fair standard to want him to carry a team like he once did. And you can make the argument this is the worst supporting cast he's ever had right now. Like, who else is good on the Lakers other than LeBron?
It's tough. It's tough.
Yeah.
Right.
And, you know,
Russell
so
Westbrook is just throwing bricks at
yeah.
the basket. It's insane.
So I think LeBron's goal, to be honest, should be get as close to Kareem as he can the rest of the season. Score as many points as he can the rest of the season. Because I think the single most important thing LeBron can still do is pass Kareem. Like, I think passing Kareem is bigger than a championship. Maybe you could argue 2 championships would be bigger, because then all of a sudden it's 6-6 with Michael. But barring 2 championships, I think the most significant individual accomplishment he can have is passing Kareem. Because one, we haven't talked about LeBron scoring as his number one thing, and he'd be the all-time leading scorer in NBA history. And second, you can't argue that, right? Like, there's no like debating, is he the all-time? No, he is. That will be there in the record books. It'll be referenced not only now, the rest of his career, as soon as he retires, 20 years from now, whenever the case may be.
Right. So
I think that's the biggest thing he can still achieve.
Yeah, it's becoming a numbers game. You know, LeBron is going to be focusing on himself. I feel like the recipe, like that recipe, the end of a awesome career, the resume with him going back to Cleveland, win another championship, have Bronny there. I mean, it does make zero sense, but it also could happen. Who knows? I'd love for that to happen as just a fan of the NBA. But I do want to say thank you for coming on. I know you have a tight schedule today, so we're doing a quick out. It's 2:00 now, which is perfect. Robin, plug yourself, plug your socials, plug all the shows you're on. The floor is yours.
Yeah, SI Feed is the new daily show, which you can catch SI.com, the YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, all SI's platforms. Follow me on Twitter. That's where I put the most stuff out there. At Robin Lundberg on Twitter. I'm the Robin Lundberg on Instagram, because somebody had Robin Lundberg on Instagram. I still haven't quite figured that out. But everything else I wind up doing, I'll wind up posting there, so you can get it from there. And appreciate the convo. Hope that was everything you could have asked for.
Robin, appreciate you coming on, man. Thank you.
Got it.